Hi, I'm Gabrielle Karol for LearnVest. Today I'm here with Kate White, the former editor of Cosmopolitan, to talk about her most recent book. I shouldn't be telling you this, and find out a little bit more about your experience. What is the toughest interview question that you like to ask?
Oh, well, I know this sounds awful, but or maybe not so awful, but I often have looked for a moment of vulnerability on the resume that I'd like to give the person an opportunity to explain. Maybe it's something like a gap in the resume, 6 months, which meant they didn't have a job. And it's interesting to see how the person does that, but I have to make a confession. I don't always ask that difficult question because I really go by my gut. I get a vibe about the person from the moment they get there, and I've often hired just from gut. In fact, I had an assistant once, we were having lunch, and he said something when I was at Harvard. I went, "Gosh, David, you went to Harvard?" He goes, "Well, it's on my resume." And I said, "Oh, I really didn't read your resume."
So would you say that you decide within the first few seconds, or?
Well, that decision not to hire, I'm right along with a lot of people. As studies show, it's often made within the first few minutes, and that's true with me, the decision not to hire. But then I really try to get a deeper sense of the person, and of course, if it's a big job, I make them do a test of some kind.
And what is the worst interview experience that you've seen someone go through? Either they totally flubbed a question or maybe broke down in the interview setting. Are there any really dramatic moments that you can remember?
Well, one of the worst things a young woman did was when I asked her, as the editor and chief of Cosmo, I asked what's your favorite magazine? She said Glamour, which was a big competitor of ours.
Doesn't sound so smart.
Yeah, and that was just idiotic, and it meant she just hadn't prepped at all. One thing I think that could really get in the way are the kind of pacifiers people use. I had a woman practically give herself a new hairstyle. She was fooling with her hair so much, and I think it's really important to think about your body language and not just what you're saying. And of course, the thing I hate most is not asking questions. Never, ever let these words come out of your mouth. No, I think you've answered everything. You just have to go in there with at least 3 really smart questions.
What do you think is the best management tip you can pass on in terms of being a good boss?
I think as a boss, you really need to walk the floor. That's an old expression I heard that was used for guys who ran factories. But it's so great. You've got to be out there with the people that work for you, not just your direct reports. And then you've got to listen to what they say. And one of the great techniques I learned, and Helen Brown, the editor of Cosmo, was known for this, was the pregnant pause. You ask a question, and then you just wait. Because often your employees are dying to tell you something about a problem or an idea, but you've got to let them know you're open to it. I had this great boss. He later became the editor of GQ, and I loved him. And he called me in one day, and he gave me just a rave review. And he actually had a great line in the review where he said that sometimes people assume that because I was really nice that they could pull one over on me, but he said Kate was a kitten with a whip. Which in this day and age, what male boss would ever write that about a female employee? But I loved it. But then he said to me, "There's just one thing, Kate." He goes, "You dig in your heels too much." And my first reaction was, "No, I don't." And I thought I was smart enough, even at 29, to go, "Shut up, Kate, right this minute." And I left the office, and I thought, he's wrong. I don't dig in my heels too much. I just try to make a point with him. But I knew that bosses want to be heard. And the smartest thing you can do when you get any kind of criticism is not bristle, try not to cry, but really hear it and then play it back to your boss in an email or a memo where you say, "I really thought about what you had to say, and I'm going to make an effort on that." In terms of friendships at work, wow, I violated the rules. When I give a party, every executive editor I've ever had is there. But here's what I did when I had to do any kind of criticism. I used this little phrase, and it made it easier. I'd say something like, "Hey, I got to put my boss hat on right now." And that made it so that it didn't come out of the blue for them. It didn't sandbag them. It let them know, okay, we're switching gears here now. This isn't personal. And that was just a great phrase to use.
In addition to being the editor of Cosmopolitan, you're also a very successful mystery writer. So, and then on top of that, you also raised a family. So, given the recent debate of can women have it all, what is your take on that?
Well, I certainly read the Slaughter article in the Atlantic, and I do think we can have it all if we define all a certain way and realize that if we're going to be moms and good moms, you do have to make trade-offs. I didn't exercise for 10 years.
10 years?
Yeah, I told my husband one day, I said, honey, I really want to write a book. And he's a great guy, marry a good guy, or have a good partner is one tip. But I said, I have to decide, exercise and have 2 babies or write the book. He goes, oh, write the book. But then once my kids got older, I got back to the gym and exercise became a big part of my life. So it's very fluid, and I think it's good to sometimes step back and ask yourself, how do I want to shift it now that my kids are a little bit older, my job changed a little bit, I have a little bit more freedom. So always be looking for times that you can make a shift where something works better for you.
So much has been written about Gen Y in the workplace, and especially that we tend to move around from job to job very, very quickly. I think that the average employee is expected to have over 12 jobs in their working life. So how do you know when it's time to leave a job? How do you know when it's time to start looking for a new opportunity?
Well, I think often a little bird tells you. It's that feeling in your gut that you're bored, that you get an email about a meeting and all you can think is, oh, no. Or for me, when I was at Cosmo, I found myself getting a little grouchy in a way I've never at work had that experience. So listen to that gut feeling, and even if you ask yourself, I wonder if I should be leaving, just the fact that you're asking is important. You also do need to do the math here too. How long do the successful people pay their dues in a particular job? You don't want to have a history of just leaving everything too quickly. And that can say to someone who's hiring you or thinking about hiring you, gee, she probably didn't get that experience that she needs there, or is there a problem that she's leaving and is never invested in the place? So not only listen internally, but think about the landscape out there and what is usually done, because often that's a great way to evaluate what you should be doing.
Great. Are you having any separation anxiety from Cosmo, or are you?
One thing, I did make my assistant take a picture of me claiming my Dutch at my desk, but I didn't feel any of that, and I think it's because it was the right time for me to leave. I thought about it a lot. I talked to my boss about it over a year ago, and I got my ducks in a row, and that made a difference. And so when it's time to leave, you tend not to have any regrets, and you move on. It's also really important when you leave a big job, not to look back, not to ask people to tell you, so what are they doing? What's she saying? The more you can close the door, not get caught up or sucked into the gossip there or all the chatter, the better. Just clean slate.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.